are not going to buy a new driver, not because you're like, oh my God, 600 is too much, but
it's
simply
saturation.
because you don't need one. You probably bought a full bag of clubs within the last 2 years. Year-over-year performance gains are not massive. They're not significant. For many golfers, they will be barely noticeable. This is the reality. And so if you already have the shiny new thing, you don't need a different shiny new thing.
All right, everybody. Welcome back. No Putts Given. Tony, Chris, Golf Spy C, Golf Spy P. We're back. It's been a little bit of a hiatus, Tony. Where did you go?
I was in Scottsdale, Arizona, which shall now be affectionately referred to as the Scotland of the Southwest, with the whipping 40-mile-an-hour wind and sub 50-degree temperatures. It was an absolute blast. Couldn't ask for more on a golf course.
Right? What else would you want? Well, that's better than me. I was in the hospital, so yeah.
Well, you lose.
I lost that one, but I'm back. I'm okay. I'm gonna make it. I think. Just depends. Two topics really today, Tony. We can kind of figure this stuff out, but we want to talk about.
Make it a quick one.
Okay, Fujikura Axiom. We got to talk graphite versus steel iron shafts. It's a topic that's not going away. It's only picking up speed. And then you posed an interesting question last week. Or got an interesting question rather. Are golf drivers specifically, have they gotten out of control in terms of pricing? Are things just too dadgum expensive? I mean, a dozen eggs, taking out a mortgage.
$47.
Right?
Eggs, I think.
I mean, when you're trying to, I need at least 3 and a decent omelet. It's like, well, now what do I do? So are things getting out of control in a pricing perspective? Then I got a couple random mailbag questions for you, Tony. So, there's that piece. Where do you want to start? You pick.
Let's start with Fujikura Axiom Graphite Iron Shafts.com.
The premise, Tony, how long have we been hearing about this shaft before we dive into what it is? I feel like we've been talking about
how long has AT been at Callaway? Because it's like that long plus like 6 months at least. So it's been a while. This is not a new development.
Can we say a couple of years? Is that fair? Probably
at least.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pre-COVID, right? So I would say.
Well, that was March of 2020. We didn't know, but
we didn't know it was Axiom, but we knew that the next generation of Fujikura iron shafts was coming.
Right, and that it would likely replace the Pro line. So let's get into it. What are they? Why should anybody care about them? Well, not that long ago, right? Fujikura came to market with its Ventus product in drivers and metalwoods, and it's become the shaft, right, of tour, retail, aftermarket. It's the thing right now. Has been for the last couple of years, probably, will be moving forward a little bit. And the question was, well, could you ever do that in an iron shaft?
Just do it 8 times. That's all.
Just do it 8 times. And so, Tony, what specifically, when they say do that in an iron shaft, what are they really talking about, or what were they kind of asking for?
That's VeloCore. That's kind of been the secret to the Ventus magic. At least that's what we're told the secret is. We just know that it works and works really, really well. I guess, if you want to say VeloCore is the reason for it, I can't dispute it. It seems to work. Nobody else has been able to replicate that success. And so it was only logical that you would try and extend that out. And for all intents and purposes, a fairway wood shaft is a driver shaft.
Right.
And they rolled it into a hybrid shaft shortly after the driver shafts came out. So what was next? Let's
iron shafts.
Put it in an iron and see how it goes.
But it's a whole different battle a little bit. But before we jump into that, I remember in one of the very first articles you wrote, maybe as we were discussing it, it was like, we found ourselves kind of talking around the idea of those old BASF commercials, where it's like, hey, we don't make the things that you buy. We make the things that you buy better. And it was kind of that idea with Ventus, right? Where it was a shaft component, or shaft technology that basically allowed the club head to function more optimally, specifically getting more, on center strikes, accessing the MOI of the head whatever the forgiveness metrics are, but basically allowing people to more consistently make center face contact or close to center face contact. And for all intents and purposes, that's kind of what we've seen. I mean, I think that's a fair statement that over the last couple of years, I've seen it in my own game personally. I think that's probably part of the success people have seen on tour is that consistency metric, and now it's in an iron. Should we do backflips, Tony?
You know, if not for the price point, I think we could. I think I'd be super excited, but I mean, there's a lot to love here. But then when I have to go, follow and go, but prices start at $105 per shaft.
Uninstalled.
If you want the 100, is it a 120 or 125?
125.
So if you want the 125 gram version, the price is $125 per shaft. See what they did there. Not sure why they didn't just split the difference and price everything in the 115 ballpark, give or take. But hey, yeah. So we know this is going to be price prohibitive for some. Fujikura knows it's price prohibitive, but it's going to be one of those things. It's going to be sold through fitters. I spoke with Ian Frazier from TXG last week. He feels like he's going to do pretty well with it, with his clientele, for the guys it fits into. So I don't think he sees it as an obstacle, the price, but certainly I can guarantee that the people sitting here listening to this, watching this, are seeing that price tag and going, "That I'm out. I'm done."
Out. Right.
Because you don't, with an iron, like you don't need just one. I tend to carry fewer irons than most people, and I need 5 or 6 of them.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean, by the time you're all said and done out the door, even if you have, like I said, you carry 5 through pitching wedge or 4 iron through pitching wedge, you're 6, 7 irons in, you're probably $800-900, right? By the time it's all said and done. And so, and Fujikura isn't running from that. They're not hiding from it. They're not trying
it's
to.
Not a top secret price.
No, they're not trying to. And to their credit, they're not trying to justify it in the sense that it's like, hey, here's why it's a great value. They're not. They're not. And I do. I appreciate that, where it's like, hey, we know it's expensive. It's kind of a concept car model in the sense that we priced it based on what we think some people might purchase it at, and gives us some retail opportunities. But the reality is, maybe over the next cycle or two of some of their other composite shafts that they have, iron shafts specifically, we may see some of this technology trickle down and ultimately find homes in products that are not quite as costly, which maybe, you look at steel shafts, they're $40 to $65, somewhere in there, uninstalled. So
it depends. You can definitely find alternatives for less, and you can certainly find alternative graphite for less, MMT quality shaft less, and then sort of, I think that what is part of the battle with graphite is we've been conditioned to think of graphite as being for old people, slow swingers, or
right.
To an extent, if you look at what has traditionally gone into OEM lineups, it's just not that good. No. It's not sort of there's no cores, Velo or otherwise. It's just it's lightweight and priced or designed to be affordable,
right?
Which means in the graphite space, not particularly exciting, I guess, is probably the nicest way to put it. There's not a lot of high tech engineering that goes into it necessarily. It's just wrap it and roll.
Wrap it, roll it, and there you go. So with this particular shaft, like you said, with Axiom, there's 3 different weight classes: 75, 105, 125. They're priced independently.
See, I didn't even look at the 75.
3 weights: 75, 105, 125. 3 prices: 105, 115, 125. Kind of the same order. And the way that they did it is they have 3 blanks for every weight class, meaning you would have like 2, 3, and 4 iron shafts would come from the same set of 3. 5, 6, 7 come from the next set of 3, and then 8, 9 wedge is that third set of blanks. They're all 370 parallel tip, not 355 taper.
I think that's worth if anybody watching this is unfamiliar, so I don't want to say typically, but iron shafts come one of two ways: parallel, which is essentially all 8, 9, however many are in your set, come from the same blank. Essentially, it's one shaft that gets cut at the tip to achieve the designated iron, and then you butt trim to length. So that's kind of how you control stiffness, as opposed to a taper tip, which is what you'd find in, certainly, broad strokes here, but oftentimes like your less expensive game improvement offerings tend to be parallel tip. And then once you get into the higher end of the market, your forgings, your most of the players' distance categories, that's going to be a taper tip design where every shaft is designed for a specific purpose. So this is the 7 iron shaft. This is the 8 iron shaft. You don't do any cutting at the tip. You cut to length, you're good to go. So a little more work involved with parallel tip. So I thought that was kind of an interesting choice, especially given, again, looking at like Mitsubishi and the MMT, they've gone taper tip in their kind of that higher weight class, that premium, if you will, that better player spec shaft. So I was a little surprised to see the parallel here, but to an extent, I get it. Yeah, I don't love it, but I get it.
I don't love it either, but I get it from their perspective that if this really is, designed to go through club builders, through, he said like Ian at TXG and the club champions, True Specs of the world, whatever, it really makes no difference to the golfer necessarily. It makes very little difference to the golfer. It's, hey, what does that fitter want to, and that fitter and that builder, what do they want to use? What kind of levers do they want to be able to pull to get it exactly to the spec that they're trying to, in terms of the length, swing weight, stiffness, and those kind of things. And for right now, that's what Fujikura feels like that's going to give those people the best opportunity to do that. So we'll see. My other question with this, Tony, is does this bring us any closer to an inflection point? Meaning, again, at one point in time, it's Tiger, 43.5-inch, steel shafted driver, right? We remember those pictures, kind of images of him at Augusta bombing it with that. And he was one of the last people to switch over to a carbon composite, a graphite shaft in his driver. Are we getting there? I mean, because on paper, it's hard to make a case for steel as the superior material to carbon composites. So are we getting there, do you think?
Oh, man, I wish I could say yes. But again, I think, and we'll talk about this in the next segment, but we know golfers are already feeling a little more than a little in some cases, or at least perception is that stuff is already too expensive. And to throw a graphite shaft reasonably, I think most of our listeners are going to be in that 115, 120, right? That's the 105, 125, 105 to 125 each. So they're going to, or 115, 125 each. So they're going to be at the higher end of already a premium priced, arguably ultra premium. I'll drink for saying that, but from a price perspective, that's certainly where we're at. And so I think until graphite reaches the point where it sort of is on the edge of affordable, or doesn't reach an ultra premium price point, is just a premium price point, it's tough. We talk about driver prices, and we will here in a few minutes, but it's not like iron prices have held steady. Now, iron prices are also, I mean, you have forgings now $1,600-$1,700 for single piece forging, and you're gonna toss in $700, $800, $900 on top of that for shafts alone. It's a really, really tough sell. And so as much as I like the idea of faster ball speed, and I think golfers will likely see that on average, again, because what we've seen with VeloCore technology and the ventus shafts is you do tend to hit that center face a little more often. So I think you can expect faster ball speed. And the other big selling point, tighter dispersion. Again, we tend to see that with the ventus shaft. Again, product of that VeloCore. They go hand in hand, and I think you will see that, but you're going to have to pay to get it, and that is the barrier. So You know, until you see, I think we're at least 2x, likely 3x the price point where you sort of are talking about graphite as a reasonable and attainable alternative to steel in an iron shaft. So I love the idea of it. I'd like to see more of it. And my expectation is these shafts are going to be, you know, I have high hopes for them from a performance perspective.
Yeah, me too.
It's been a while since Fujikura has disappointed me with a product, and so I don't expect I'll be disappointed here. But yeah, this is not the product that kicks the door open.
Yeah, and I think too the other challenge.
Home.
The other challenge I think they face too, and by they I mean just kind of the whole composite industry with that is, yeah, there is the price component, and we know it's expensive, etc. But you know, when people switch to a solid core ball, like when Pro V1 hit out right in 2000, 2001, the performance difference was immediate, noticeable. It was like you were automatically 20 yards behind everybody else if you didn't switch, right? Saw a similar kind of jump with composite shafts in terms of metal woods. It was like, hey, unless you're Tiger, at that point in time, you're going to be behind. There was clear and demonstrable performance differences in that regard, right? With iron shafts, I think it's a little more subtle. I mean, yes, we're talking increases in ball speed. We're talking total iron performance isn't subtle. It's like, geez, if I can hit it at my target or closer to my target more often, that makes total sense to me. But it doesn't have that wow factor of, ooh, look at that, And so I think part of that is people coming around to the reality of what actually impacts performance and understanding how impactful that could be to somebody's game. If I could say, hey, if you could really decrease your dispersion on your 7-iron by 15%, they go, yeah, that sounds good, but what does that actually mean to me? If they could actually see and go, okay, over 2 rounds, 3 rounds, 4 rounds, here's what that might do for you. But that's a learning curve, man. That's going to be hard for the average consumer to get their head around.
I think everybody's math is probably a little bit different, but there's definitely a performance per dollar calculation that goes on in our head, and I'll keep referring to the driver, but we see people saying, hey, is it 3 more yards? Is it 5 more yards? What am I getting for $600? And that's already a challenge. And now we're saying, all right, well, for $900, right, you can bring in your dispersion by some amount that you may not even. It's a bit like the golf ball argument. I'm not good enough to see the difference. And as much as I can say, whether or not you see it, whether or not you comprehend it, it's real. It is there. You can appreciate it ultimately, but it's really, really tricky to see tighter dispersion in sort of little, one shot at a time, if you will. So to kind of see it over a prolonged period of time, you only see that after you've made the investment, I think. Right. And that alone makes it kind of a tough sell. Like, oh yeah, no, I hit them well during my fitting, but what am I going to really see? So there's a little bit of doubt in that for sure. And while I think, again, I'm confident it's going to translate, man, price wise, whew.
Yeah, so we'll see. Like I said, I'm very optimistic from a performance standpoint. We've been waiting for these for a while, so it'll be fun. A long while. Like I said, I thought they should have named the product Godot, for waiting for Godot, and people that know the play will get that reference. But let's go right into the drivers. So you said that Titleist TSR $600, right? Stealth 2 plus we're pushing over $600. $630 again. Paradigm $600, whatever. They're all there. We're not singling out any particular manufacturer. The point is the going rate, if you will, for a premium driver that just came out is plus or minus $600. So five to 6.
Mizuno tends to be a little less. Cobra doesn't go all the way up to 6. So there are
pings in there.
Pings at 6 now, I believe. So
yeah.
It is, and there are some, PXG has been less. I don't know if they're going to stay way low for long. I suspect that, and we'll have more to say about this in a couple of weeks, but I suspect the days of significant deep cost cuts are gone for PXG as well, at least in the short term. So 600 is the reality. And the question I tackled is, ultimately, if are golfers starting to balk at driver prices as they get to $600?
Yeah, basically, I mean, that's the basic question is $600 too much for a driver from the standpoint of, is that price too high based on what we're thinking the demand will be for a $600 driver, right? And you wrote the article we talked about. We got feedback. Some people said yes, some people kind of said no, but kind of run me through what your thoughts are. And then I have some quotes I pulled out from people that responded, and I would love to get your thoughts on these, Tony.
Sure. Yeah, it's easy. And this all started with one of our forum moderators Robert has worked in a pro shop for a long time. And his observation, I don't think it's even to him is anything more than that, but his observation is that to date, this year, he has sold fewer drivers than in recent years. And so the logical question to come out of that is, are golfers starting to balk at the high price point?
Yeah.
And, I kind of thought about it. It seems like the obvious answer would be yes. But as I kind of thought through it, because it sounds like, but, I've been doing this for 12 years, maybe more. When I started, people bitched about $300 drivers, and then $400 drivers and $450, and we complained every step of the way.
Right.
Nobody likes higher prices. I get that, but it didn't stop the sales from happening. People are still buying drivers, and so kind of what I came to believe was based on a conversation I heard on the radio not too long ago. And I reference this in the article. I call it golf's patio furniture problem. Mm-hmm. But the premise is, in listening to an interview with a guy who owns a shop that sells patio furniture and whose sales have declined, he didn't reference patio furniture having a price problem. And if you've ever looked at patio furniture, if you've ever
priced it out,
if you think golf clubs are expensive, go look at an Adirondack chair or a table and chairs from anybody that's outside the big box store. If you're looking for decent stuff, your equivalent of a Callaway, whatever a Callaway patio paradigm, like, whatever kind of that that upper echelon, your Titleist, your Callaways, your TaylorMades of patio furniture,
right?
Like that stuff has gone up in price. It's way expensive for what it is. But the most relevant point to this discussion is, just as with golf clubs, it took off during COVID, during the pandemic. Everybody who wanted patio furniture, who needed patio furniture, who even had a thought about patio furniture, bought patio furniture, right? Right. Outdoor living kind of became a thing because, you could either live inside your house or outside your house, but you couldn't live anywhere else. So swimming pools, I mentioned, right? I know half a dozen people who had pools put in, hot tubs, right? All of this outdoor living stuff, patio furniture, no different. And if you think about the sporting world, what we talk about, golf was unique because it was kind of the thing that you could do. It was, for a time, quite literally the only game in town.
Right.
And everybody bought golf clubs. Everybody who could ever need one. We saw it in our surveys. Replacement rates.
Crazy
drivers
high.
For 2+ years running, 50% of the people who responded said they had bought a new driver in the last year. Irons, where the typical replacement cycle runs 4 to 6 years. Readers told us, I have bought 40% 2 years in a row. Told us.
Yeah.
I bought new irons within the last year. So at some point, you are not going to buy a new driver, not because you're like, oh my God, 600 is too much, but
it's
simply
saturation.
Because you don't need one. You just bought one. Your buddy just bought one. He may have bought two. You probably bought a full bag of clubs within the last 2 years. So regardless of what the price is, you aren't buying because you don't need it. You already have it or something very much like it. And that problem is admittedly compounded by the fact that year-over-year performance gains are not massive. They're not significant. For many golfers, they will be barely noticeable. This is the reality. And so if you already have the shiny new thing, you don't need a different shiny new thing.
Right. It's a more convoluted situation. Supply and demand, Econ 101, prices go up, people buy less of an item. That's not necessarily the case here. Like you mentioned, at any price point, that's too expensive for somebody, right?
Especially if you already have it,
then it doesn't matter. So by that logic, if that piece of the market's kind of saturated, they could lower it to $4.99 and really shouldn't sell anymore, because like, hey, it's kind of one of those things. Like, if I already have a TV that I'm really happy with, I'm not going to replace that TV with there's year-over-year gains. Like, hey, that's not even significant enough. I don't care if you discount it from $1,500 to $800. That's still $800 more than zero. So why would I replace that one at any price? I won't.
I have zero need for a new TV, and therefore I'm willing to invest $0 in said new TV. I think it's a very similar situation. And look, sales aren't going to be nothing. I mean,
no,
companies are going to do okay this year because there are still some people who either actually didn't buy or always want something newer, something presumably better, or willing to buy another lottery ticket in the equipment space, whatever you have it. But I think there is a day of reckoning coming for the equipment industry and as a whole. I think it's going to be interesting, because I firmly believe that there'll be one or two companies that either didn't see that the day of reckoning was coming or felt like our stuff is so good we're immune to it. So at some point, I think a surplus is inevitable. Somebody is going to have too much equipment in the marketplace, and we are going to see mid-year, maybe you'll get towards the edge of fall. But I think I'm fairly confident somebody's going to have too much stuff, and that's going to mean discounts. Maybe we'll get to the point where we're doing that buy a driver, get a free fairway wood thing. Now, I don't think this is going to be a prolonged thing where it like becomes an every year thing like it was for a while. But I do think the channel may be flooded with more gear than retailers can offload. And so you are going to have to see some course corrections. That's my hunch. We'll see.
Yeah, and too, I think, coming out of COVID, the hedge would be to overbuy on materials maybe and surplus, because this crop of drivers that's out now and stuff that's out now, these orders were placed right in the fall, maybe even prior to that ish. So they're forecasting, they're projecting. It's not like, and they don't want to get caught short, right? That's the worst thing they could do, is get caught short, have a banner year again, whatever, run through inventory, and then be in that situation where it's like it's June or July. It's like, hey, it's 4 to 6 weeks to get a club in again. So they, I think, really, really want to avoid that. But like you said, on the other hand, the reasons to get a new driver, certainly year over year, don't really exist. And if, more than half the population, say even 2/3 that are going to buy a new driver did so in the last cycle or two, your pool of possible consumers is just, much, much smaller, than it was. So who knows, Tony?
You're entering the shallow end of the pool, I think, in terms of opportunity right now. How long whether or not like this is the beginning of a decline, and certainly there's some economic indicators that suggest like it could be bumpy for a little while. So is this just a 1-year course correction? Is it a 2-year, 3-year thing? But I don't think prices come down as a result, unless, at least not prices at launch. Like I said, you may see discounting. I think you will see discounting a little bit this year in a way we haven't seen for a handful of years. But I think the industry is probably smart enough to learn from past lessons, and it's not going to be a prolonged issue. And maybe we do see a situation where there is a bounce back and somebody gets caught a little short, but that may actually be the preferable problem.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one to watch. I'd love to hear people's comments too. If you are buying new clubs this year, which category are you in? Are you excited to buy new clubs this year? Are you more in that, hey, I'm saving my money for eggs and dealing with 6-7% inflation and things like that, and so, man, I just got a driver. So there, like I said, if reprimand. I'm willing to invest $0 in a new TV. There's got to be a lot of people that are in that place too. Are like, I'm willing to invest $0 in a new driver. So there you have it. Mailbag, Tony. So I know you watch nothing but golf on the weekends. You're just dialed in, tuned in.
I watch nothing or golf.
Mostly
nothing.
Good time to nap. But right, they've had kind of this cool feature where they mic players up for a hole, and they had Max Hahn on one which was really kind of cool. Keith Mitchell on another one. My question is, if you could have any player mic'd up for a whole round, who would it be, and where would you want them to play? Who would you want to listen to? Maybe an upcoming tournament or something like that.
Oh man, I think the answer is probably Pat Perez, although he's on livin, so I would never actually see it. I think I get the CW. I don't know.
Look into that.
Yeah,
should look into that.
I don't know. I don't know where. I don't care where. I just don't.
You don't. Any players though that you'd be like, man, I really want this person to be mic'd up for the whole round, be super interesting.
Right. I mean, the obvious answer is Tiger, right? But I don't know. I
think he'd be boring.
He might be. He likes his F-bombs, though. I can get behind that.
Yeah. I want Jordan Spieth at the Masters.
He's a talker. He's a talker. That could work.
Especially given some of the demons he has on like number 12. Some of these holes, like I'd be very interested to hear him talk through shots and processes, and especially if he were to know there's somebody on the other side of the being mic'd up, right? Because like in this one, there's back and forth with the announcers, and it's like, hey, Jordan, third shot in here, you got a little bit of a downhill lie, the pins, middle or whatever. Talk us through the shot here. I don't know. It'd be interesting to hear that.
Bryson just every shot has to talk about how his equipment let him down on that particular occasion, how it just wasn't good enough for what he was trying to execute. I'd be down for that, but again, I don't know if I get CW.
Yeah, well, yeah. Again, fair point. My other one, I thought it'd be kind of fun at like the players, like on number 17, if every player that went through there on a certain day was mic'd up, so you can kind of hear what they're all thinking or doing or whatever, kind of through that particular hole. I don't know. I think that might be kind of fun, but what do I know, Tony?
I don't know.
Couple comments I picked out here. One of them was this. They said, our club's too expensive. The person said, yeah, it's clear they're too expensive because PXG can sell them basically at half price, and they seem to be doing fine. Are the prices bloated to the point? I mean, because it's a fair criticism since we have seen the $299. We've seen ridiculously low prices, but I think their point is if they can sell them at $600, can they sell them at $300?
If you're PXG, you can, because you own your distribution almost entirely. You don't sell at Dick's Sporting Goods. You Superstore. You don't sell at the local green grass, pro shops, any place that, quite honestly, any place where golfers have traditionally bought golf clubs, any place where the retailer takes 30+% out of your sale. So
right.
if I'm not giving away 30+% off the top, then yeah, I can sell for less. It is one of the advantages that PXG has in the marketplace for sure, is that by and large, it said, look, we're just not going to play that retail game. In addition to forcing us to have higher prices all the time, it ties our hands. We can't discount. We can't do sales. Like that's the boat the rest of the industry is in, because that disrupts retail when you do that stuff.
Right.
PXG doesn't have to worry about that. So that's one piece of it. And the other thing too, if you're willing to sell a club for no money, or in some cases at an actual loss to clear inventory or whatever it happens to be, yeah, you can do that. But in terms of a business model, that's not really sustainable. If I manufacture a club and all in it costs me $300 to make, and I sell it for $250,
right?
Yeah, you don't have to be a mathematical wizard to figure out that business model is not sustainable.
Yeah.
So that's the other piece of it. So yeah, I mean, could clubs cost a little bit less than they do? Yeah, absolutely. Is it realistic to think that every driver should cost $200 or less because PXG sold a driver for 200 or less? No, that's not sustainable. That's just yeah. It's not going to work. It's just not going to work.
All right, last question, Tony. This one came up in the comments, and I'll give you a little context to it and background because I know that people get this. I know that they understand that the existence of higher price goods does not eliminate the existence of lower price goods. So your $600 driver does not mean that there aren't really, really good options at much lower price points. The question or the comment that came from the article was basically, this is pushing the elitism of golf in a certain direction, these higher prices, etc. So my question to you is, what is it about golf or golf equipment or whatever, in your opinion, that people feel like the price of the top end stuff needs to be in a range that is somehow palatable to the masses? Like, it's unfair if I want to buy the best of the best or the new stuff that somehow that is what dictates whether something's affordable or not.
I mean, golf has always been expensive to an extent. It has always been elitist, or at least perceived by those who don't play it very often as an elitist activity, expenditure of time, whatever you want to call it. So that is, I mean, to an extent, it is the nature of golf. You have numerous country clubs, many of which are, by some measure, exclusive, some of them ultra exclusive, I suppose. And yeah, there are public alternatives, right? You can play Goat Hill for almost no money, wear whatever you want, and bring whatever clubs you want. So yeah, new clubs are expensive. In some cases, excessively so, I would argue. But we talked about, you can get some PXG stuff for pretty cheap. Tour Edge is moderately to low price. Sub 70, which it's sort of staked its claim to the brand for those who value customer service. I mean, that's an inexpensive option. New level, inexpensive option. So as you said, the fact that a Titleist driver is 600 or TaylorMade is 630 or whichever model you want to choose is the thing to point to and before shaking an angry fist. The fact of the matter is you still have all kinds of options. You can still get last year's model for less. In some cases, you can get the model from the year before last for even less than that. So you don't have to spend the money if you don't want to. And that's true of most anything. I mean, it's probably a good idea spending money on a dentist, for example, from time to time. But
yeah, where do you want
otherwise, you don't have to buy a $600 driver. You don't have to spend $1,200 on irons. You don't have to spend over $200 to get the jet black premium finish on a new Vokey wedge. The list goes on and on of the things you do not have to buy. If you don't want to spend $55 on a Pro V1, you don't have to. There are lower priced alternatives in every category. So I get it, because we all kind of want the expensive stuff. I mean, there is a component, right, that we equate price to performance, and in some cases to quality and things like that. But you don't have to spend the money. You don't need to spend the money. You can, I mean, once upon a time, I mean, I did a post years ago where I went on eBay and put together a complete bag of clubs for well less than $1,000, and I think you could still do it today.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe we should. I mean, that'd be an interesting thing to curate. And you've seen some of those where, hey, what's the best bag I can put together for, X amount, 500,000, 1,500, whatever the case is. But the other point being, things are expensive. Nothing is without a certain cost. But to enjoy golf, to play it really, really well, you don't need the best of everything ever.
You may want it. I want it. We all want it, but you don't need it. And so
Daniel Berger doesn't need it. He's playing irons that are, what, 12 years old? Went on eBay and bought up every single one of them he could possibly find. This guy playing at the absolute highest level of the game. I could argue, with performance stuff, geez, we can put together a bag for you that's really, really solid for, pennies on the dollar compared to new stuff. So you don't need that. I'm sure some manufacturers don't love to hear us saying that, but I get it.
You want it.
I get it.
I want it all.
Yeah, sure you do.
You don't need Axiom shafts. Sure would be nice if you could get them though.
Yep. I hear you. Anything else, Tony? Anything else you want to share with us today?
No, I think we are good for this week.
All right. Well, post your comments below. Let us know if you got questions. Golf Spy T, Golf Spy C, Chris Nickel, Tony Covey. And until we see you next time, we out.